Hello and welcome to Sport Ball. I am Drew Wheeler and Tommy Jones is not relevant right now. Anyway, I will be recapping the Eagles season this year and I will have my playoff prediction for tomorrow's game. So we're going to start with the preseason where the Eagles started off the season. They were not a very popular pick for playoff contention and they were projected to end up last in the NFC East. Well, they obviously proved everyone who doubted them wrong and ended up with a 13-3 record, clinching the first seed in the NFC. Anyway, the reasons that everyone picked this, like them to be last, was the new signings were showing possible chemistry problems, but that was also not a factor during the season. They didn't really have a real cornerback, which at the time was true, but then they made some moves later to make that not a problem. And everyone was saying Carson Wentz was going to have a sophomore slump, which obviously was not the case, as he was probably the best quarterback in the league this year. Now, mid-preseason, they traded their number 2 receiver, Jordan Matthews, for the Buffalo Bills cornerback, Ronald Darby, who turned out to make an immediate impact in their first game. Well, they ended this preseason 2-2, and everyone was like, okay, this is what they're going to be, a 500 team. But let's not forget, the Cleveland Browns finished the preseason 4-0, and look where they were, 0-16. Anyway, their first 2 games, they lose Ronald Darby with a dislocated ankle in their first game. That is awful. I can't believe that that actually happened to this Eagles team. It seems every year we lose a player to an injury. They go 1-1 in their first 2 games. People still didn't expect much from them. They were a 500 team. Their kicker got hurt, so no one really knew what the Eagles team was going to be this year. Everyone projected them as like 8-8 or 7-9 team. But in games 3 through 11, they won every single game, outscoring opponents 301 to 147. That is more than doubling all their opponents' scores. They had Jake Elliott kick a 61-yard field goal against the New York Giants to win that game. They lost Darren Sproles to an ACL tear and a broken arm on the same play, and he would not play again for the rest of the season. They lost their starting right tackle, Pro Bowl right tackle, and future Hall of Famer right tackle, Jason Peters, to an ACL tear in the middle of that stretch too. Their entire team was dropping like flies. They eventually lost Jordan Hicks to some hand injury, then an Achilles injury, so he was out as well. Well, their West Coast trip, they went 1-1, but it was obviously the worst 2 weeks in Eagles fan history, and you cannot tell me otherwise. They lost to the Seattle Seahawks 24-7, and they had Russell Wilson playing Madden football out there, basically running around and throwing the ball deep every play and catching it. So people started doubting if they could beat playoff contending teams, even though they beat the Panthers, Chargers, and the Cowboys all during that previous win streak. They stayed out west for the next game in LA, and they practiced at the Los Angeles Baseball Angels Stadium and had a good time adjusting to West Coast life. And then they played the Rams. Yeah, they won, but this was not a great game. The defense gave up 35 points and 109 rushing yards, but their offense did look incredible the entire game, scoring 35 points. But with 4 minutes and 4 seconds left in the third quarter, Carson Wentz scrambled for a touchdown, which was later called back for holding, but he seemed to be shaken up. He stayed in for 3 more plays and threw a touchdown pass, and then he was done for the rest of the day. He goes off the field and into the locker room and was reported out for the rest of the game. Nick Foles comes in and leads the team to a victory, and no, Philadelphia Eagles fans, that is not a joke. The next Monday, Doug Peterson held a press conference revealing that, in fact, Wentz had a torn ACL. I personally was listening to 97.5 The Fanatic, and I never heard Mike Missanelli so sad in my entire life. So everyone was wondering what Nick Foles would bring to this team and if he would even help or even hurt the Eagles. Well, they played the Giants, and Foles goes off for 4 touchdowns. No, that is not a joke either. The Eagles won, but the defense was awful. They gave up so many points to one of the worst offenses in the league at the time. So then everyone was like, okay, if Nick Foles keeps playing like that and the defense comes back to their beginning of the season stuff, they'll be great. But then they played the Raiders, and the defense did go back to the beginning of the season defense that the Philadelphia Eagles fans all knew and loved. But the Eagles won barely. Why? Because Nick Foles was atrocious. They did clinch home field advantage to the Super Bowl, though, which is very much needed when we had the backup quarterback of Nick Foles playing. Now, the Cowboys game I don't even really like talking about because they got shut out 6-0. The defense played their first team and then most of their second team for the entire game and still let up only 6 points to the Dallas Cowboys starters, which includes Ezekiel Elliott, former Rookie of the Year, Dak Prescott, who is extremely overrated, and Dez Bryant. So Foles was awful again. He threw an interception. He went 4 for 11 for 39 yards, no touchdowns. So then Nate Sudfeld comes in and sucks a little bit less and doesn't have 20-pound bricks for feet. He runs for yards. He passes for yards. He went 19 for 23 with 134 yards, 0 interceptions and 0 touchdowns. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but granted, he was throwing to Mac Hollins as his #1 receiver against that Cowboys starting defense. He did great. Why they don't have Nate Sudfeld starting for the playoff game, I have no idea. But they are now playing the Atlanta Falcons tomorrow. So I am making my game prediction right now for this game. I say it's going to be a low-scoring game because of the conditions. It's going to be raining and cold the entire game. So there's going to be a lot of run defense, run offense, a lot of running the ball in general. Anyway, I say that the Eagles will be winning 17-10 against the Falcons because they have the running backs that will help, and their defense will shut down the Falcons. I will be recording a follow-up for this next week. Hello, and welcome to the second half of my video on the Eagles. Now, let me just say, I was wrong. The score wasn't what I predicted. It was still an Eagles victory, though. Now, they play the Vikings this next week at home. Case Keenum, first time ever, hostile environment. I take the Eagles to win this game 17-10. Defensive game, 1 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown, and a field goal. Case Keenum will throw 1 touchdown, but the Eagles' rush defense will stop the running backs of Minnesota. The Falcons had a great game in the first half, but the Eagles' defense stopped them in the second half. And now they will be sitting on the couch watching the Eagles play the Minnesota Vikings in Philadelphia for the NFC Championship and for a trip to the Super Bowl. On a side note, Blake Bortles is the playoff MVP. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.